Today we will talk about print statement in Python, variables, constants, and input statement in Python. Okay, so before starting, I would like to give you guys a bonus tip here. So I have written something here called Zen of Python. So basically, Zen of Python is the psychology behind how to write Pythonic code and the conventions behind designing Python based applications, right? So there are basically some rules which have been like added into this list, and it is a very popular list. So just go and search about Zen of Python. So we can also print what are the exact statements in Zen of Python, and to print it, it they have a very interesting module, interesting file actually. So if we write this statement, import this, and then we run our file. So like in last lecture we saw that to run a Python script we need to write Python and then the script name, which is lecture 1. So if I press enter, see it has printed some lines. So where did these lines come from, right? So when I imported this module, so I will give you a small background of import statement. We can go into the details later in different video. So if we have multiple modules or multiple files in our project and we want to use a function from different module, so we import that module or that object or that variable from that module, right? So to import these things, Python provides us a keyword import, right? So we just did a simple thing here, that there is a file named this in Python and we just imported it. So it is just a Python script, right? And when we imported it, it just ran and it gave this output. So now let's see on what is the output of this file. So there are some points here like beautiful is better than ugly of course, and simple is better than complex. Python focuses on writing simple code and not the complex code, right? And if even if you want, if the condition is something like you want to write complex code, then complex is better than complicated, right? So the basic goal here is to keep your code as less complex as you can, right? And there are like many other guidelines which you can read. I would definitely recommend you to read this and follow this whenever you are writing a Python code, right? So if we can see another thing, yeah, okay, this one is good. If the implementation is hard to explain, it is a bad idea, right? So maybe we can simplify it and write it in a simpler way. And if similarly, if the implementation is easy to explain, it may be a good idea, right? So there are other guidelines which you can see, but keep in mind that there can be exceptions to these rules, right? So if you, after like doing all your research, after trying to do what you want to do, and you are still not able to follow this, and when you are sure that your basic structure is also good and there is nothing wrong with it, then there can be some exceptions when you can ignore these rules and avoid these rules, and yeah, and write your code which doesn't follow these guidelines. So now we will start with the print statement. So if we want to print anything into the terminal or on the console, we use print statement. We don't need to import it. It is already available in the current scope always. So let's see the basic syntax. So the basic syntax is very simple. So print is actually a built-in function. So you just call it with the parameter which will be the value you want to print, right? So if I want to print my name, I will say print and then pass Usman space Abasi as parameter. And if I run this script, Python lecture 1, down here, I will see that it will print my name. Okay, so we will just remove this import statement because it will print all those guidelines again and again. So now we will run it again and see, here is my name. So this is very simple if you want to print anything in Python, right? But you can notice that I have hard coded this string, right? We can use other things here which we will look later. So for print statement, there's another thing I would like to tell you is you can pass as many values as you want, right? So if I want to print Usman Abbasi and I want to print Python lecture 1, and I want to print statement, So this can be lecture name or whatever. So if I run it now, it will print all three of these. See, so this is how the print statement basically works. So next we will move on to the variables. So how variables work and what are variables actually? So variables basically are the memory where we can store some values, right? Because whenever we are writing a program, we are solving a problem, we need to store some values in memory, and variable are the things we can use, right? And constraints can also be the things where we can store our values, but they differ with each other in a way that if you have defined a variable, you can change its value in its lifetime. So let's say you have defined a variable named my name, and you assign Usman to it, and after that you can say my name, you can update my name variable to say that it can be Abasi, right? So you can change the value of variable. But in case of constraints, constraints value do not change, right? So if you assign a value to a constraint, it shouldn't be changed in its lifetime. This is basically how generally variables and constraints works, and this is basically the concept of variables and constraints. But in Python there is a slight difference which I will show you guys later. So let's start with the variables. So variables basically has three things usually: the data type, the variable name, and the variable value. So Python is actually a dynamic programming language, which means that the type of the variables are not important, right? If you have created a variable and you have stored an integer in it, in the next line or whenever, you can save string in that same variable, right? So there is no specific data type fixed to that variable, so that makes it dynamic, right? So if we want to declare a variable in Python, it's very simple. You just write the name of the variable. Let's say I call variable first name, and if I want to assign a value, I will write equal sign, and then I will give it the value, right? So first name should be a string, because first name is a string kind of value. So I will say first name Usman. I will declare another variable which I will call last name, and I will assign it Abasi, and I will create another variable or which where I want to store an integer value. So I will say age, and I will say 26, right? So if you have noticed, in first two variables I have stored string, in last variable I have stored integer, but I have nowhere given the type of these variables, right? So this is what I was talking about, that in Python you don't need to give the type of the variable. So now these variables will contain the values. So instead of printing these hardcode values, now we can print our variables also, right? So if I want to print the first name, I will pass the variable name to the print function. So the variable name is first name. I want to print all the variables, so I will pass last name, then I will pass age. So print statement will print all these values. So let's see what it does now. Okay, so see, it printed all these things. You can also print in another way. So if you don't want to pass all the parameters to one print statement, you can write a separate print statement for each of the variable. So I will say print first name, print last name, and print age, right? So it will give the same result. See, yeah, the difference, there was a minor difference, that if I write a separate print statement, at the end of every print statement we will get a new line. So these are in different lines, but if I was using a same print statement, they were in same line but with a space. So that's a minor difference, and you can use it according to your requirements. So that's basically a very simple use case of using variables with print statements. Another thing which I was talking about, that this is a dynamic programming language. So I would like to show you an example. So let's say this age is storing 26 here, and after printing, I say age is equal to, let's say I write it in digits, 26. So should it allow? So in other languages which are not dynamic, this will give us an error because we need to define the type of the variable. But Python is dynamic, so we can store any type of value in variable throughout its lifetime. So now the age will contain 26. Let's run it and see it working. See, so it is printing 26. So it doesn't matter what type of value you are storing in a variable. So that's basically about variable. Now we will move to constants. So how constants work are almost similar to the variables, right? So let's say I want to declare a constant which can be like let's say country name, right? So I will write country underscore name, and same like first we need to write the variable name, then we will write equal to sign which will assign the value to the variable, and then we will write the name, right? So it can be anything, like I will say Pakistan. So okay, so this is a constant in Python. Now you must be considering there is no actual difference between initializing or defining a variable or defining a constant. So yes, you're right. The only difference is in the convention. If you have noticed, I have written all the whole variable name in caps, right, in capital letters. So if in anywhere in Python code you face a variable which is written in capitals, you should know that this is a constant and this is not intended to be changed. You should never change that constant value. So let's see how it works, right? So if I print here print country name, and if I run the script lecture 1, it is printing Pakistan, right? Value can be anything. Value doesn't need to be in caps. The variable name needs to be in capital letters. So now let's see if we can change the variable value of the constant or not. So let's say I say country name equal to Germany. Okay, so now we will print country name. So let's see if it prints or not. And yes, it is. It has changed the value of the constant. So what was the difference? So if we can say this country name is highlighted, right? Okay, so this is something PyCharm is giving us warning that we haven't used it and redefining it. Okay, so it is not giving a warning against the because it was a constraint. We will discuss about the PyCharm warnings in our another video. So we have seen that it has changed the name, right? So why did we call it constraint? So there is one the one convention in Python which says that we are all adults here, right? So it means that if something is intended to be a constant, we are adults and we shouldn't be changing that value. Though we can change it, but we shouldn't be changing it because we are intelligent adult guys, right? So this is the only difference between constants and variables. Like there are no actual constants in Python. There is only a convention to name constants like this, but this actually in fact is a variable. So this is just a convention, right? So this is how you define a constant in Python, so-called constant, and these are the variables. So next we will move on to the input statement. Okay, so now the input statement. So input statement is basically used to take input from the user. So let's say we have written a script and we want any input from the user. Let's say we want to take the name of the user, right? So there is a function to take the input which is called input. It is already in scope like print statement, so no imports needed. So yeah, so it is showing us that prompt, this is an optional parameter here. So prompt is like the message we want to print when taking input. So let's say we can say please enter your age. We can use print statement for this and then use input statement, but input statement gives this very cool functionality to print the prompt at the same time you are taking the input, right? So we will say input please enter your age, and when the user will enter the age, input will return that value. So we need to save that value in some variable We will talk about the functions and return values later in the functions video, but for now let's just consider that when calling input, the whatever the value user will input into the terminal, that will be saved in the variable here, right? So let's run this. In fact, we should print the age so we can confirm what user entered. So let's see. Okay, so you can see it is stuck here because it is waiting for the user input. So the program flow is stopped here, and it will continue when we will enter the we will give the input. So now we will give any input, like we can say 26 or something else. Okay, 24, and see it print the age because of this value, and the value we entered here was stored in this variable, right? Similarly, you can ask to get the name. Please enter your name, and after age we will print name. So okay, so first age, then name, and it printed both of these things, right? First age and then the name. So one caveat here is that whenever the value is taken from the terminal like this, its data type will always be string. So when we print this age here, it showed us 25, but actually the type of this variable is in string, right? So let's say we have taken age, and we always want to add 1 in the age. So we say age is equal to age plus 1, like whatever the age currently is, we will add 1 to it and then store in age, right? So we took the input in age variable from user, which we are expecting that the user will give integer value something like 25. Then we add 25 and 1, right? We save the sum in this variable, which should be 26, and then we just simply print the new age, which should be 26. Let's run and see what error it gives. So we will enter 25, enter name, or let's just comment these two inputs. We will just use this one. So let's run it again. So okay, oh yeah, so I need to at least take the input for age. So yeah, so it is waiting for age. I have entered 26 here. Now the 26 will be stored in this age. In the next line, I will add 1 to age, so it means it should become 26, and that will be 27, and that will be stored in this age variable, and then we are printing this age variable. So basically it should print 27. So let's see what it does. So it has given us an error. So we can see what the error is. So it is saying that at this line number 29, which is this, where we are adding 1 to the user input, which was 26, it is saying that there is some kind of type error, must be str not int, right? Because this age contains string value, str is short for string. So because this string is this age variable contains string value, so it is, the interpreter is telling us that we cannot add integer to a string, right? We can add string to a string, which means that we append the two strings. We will see in later videos related to list or in some other video. And if we want to add something in integer, we can only add integer or float, any number data types, right? So in order to make this error free, make it run, we need to convert age into the type integer, right? So for that, we can use our built-in function, which is called there is a thing called casting, typecasting, so which converts one data type into another data type if possible. So we know that age it contains 26, and it is possible to convert this string into an integer 26. So we can say int, and we will pass the value we want to convert to this function. Just let's not worry about how exactly it is working. You will get familiar with this in functions, in the video related to functions. So let's say this is a function, just like a print function or an input function, which takes a value and converts it into a string. So now after calling this age will be converted into integer. So now we can add 1 to that integer. Now we will run it and see if it works. So we add 26, Yeah, so it is giving us the correct output because now we have converted the age into the proper integer type. Okay, so if we can also see related to the the strings, how we can add strings. So let's say we have a string here, first name and last name, and we want to create a variable which is called full name, and which should be like, you know, Usman space Abasi, right? But we already have first name and last name, so we shouldn't be hard coding this value here. We should use the values of these two variables here. So in order to append two strings, to concatenate two strings, we can just add them, right? So if I say first name plus last name and store the result in full name, so it means that the value in first name will be concatenated with the value in last name variable, which is Usman and Abasi. So now we will print full name here also. I'm commenting this input line because we don't need it anymore, this print statement also. So now let's see what it says. So see, it has concatenated both of the strings. So we can add strings, we can add integers, and we can add multiple data types to each other when they are compatible. So one thing here we need to change is, like, we can see that there is no space between first and last name. So we don't only need to have variables to add to each other. We can add hard-coded values also. So for example, we want to add space between these two variables, so we can add another plus, like plus. So we can say that we want to add a string here, and then we also want to add last name to that string. And what should be the value of this string? We only need a space, so we'll just press space, and this is a string. This can be any string, right? So now if we print, it will combine first name, then it will concatenate it with this string, which is only a space, and then it will concatenate it with last name. So now it should print a name with space. See, so we can, like, we can add as much as we want, like I can say uh, appended or updated or anything. We can append anything, we can concatenate anything to it, and see, it is giving us the correct output. So we will also add space here, and see, Usman Abasi updated. So you can, concatenate strings like this. Okay, so another last thing before finishing the video is the F statement. So what is the F statement actually? So let's say like we were doing here, we want to combine, or we want to write a sentence, some sentence, right? So we can just call this variable out sentence, and we want to print here that the full name is, and then we want to print the full name, right? We want to print the value of this variable here, right? Whatever the value in it is in there. So if I print this, it says the full name is full name, of course, because this is just a string, right? So Python does not know this, that this is a variable, and I need to replace the value of this variable here, right? So in order to tell Python that we don't need full name hard-coded string here, we need the value of this variable. So to use variables inside a strings, we use these curly brackets. So we write a curly bracket opening and closing, and then in these two brackets we write the name of the variable, right? So there is a thing in Python called F statement. So if I print it here, it will still not print the the value of this variable. The To print the value of this variable, Python provides us with the functionality which is called F string. So before our string, like before this starting quotation mark, we need to write F, just F and nothing more. Now this tells Python that the string after the F contains some variables, and we need to print the values of those variables. So anything in the so now this string is called F string because we have written F here, and it tells that anything inside this string which is written inside curly braces is the name of the variable and it need to be replaced with the actual value, right? So by writing this f, we are telling that we need to print the value of full name and not the string full name. So now it will print the full name. See, the full name is Usman Abbasi updated, whatever was stored in this full name. So I would suggest you to go play with it and write different kind of strings, integers, add values, add strings, concatenate with each other, take different kind of inputs, and yeah, just play with it. I will also attach this script. Maybe I will attach the link of this script to the video so you can just get a starting point to start with Python. So well, that's it for today. See you in next video.